Why we desire to be acknowledged. Now, being acknowledged by somebody can mean a couple of different things. It can both be a positive thing, a negative thing, or overall just a neutral saying. Like, for example, if I was to say the neutral saying of being acknowledged, it'd be like, person A acknowledged that person B is here in a topic of conversation. That's probably like a neutral way I could say it. You know, sometimes people use the word acknowledge in different terms in different ways, but today we're specifically going to be going into why we, desire to be acknowledged by said groups of people. And also kind of diving into why being acknowledged feels so fulfilling and why it's something that we as people just need. And I kind of just want to talk about it because I had an experience happen the other day where I caught myself wanting that validation and acknowledgement from people when in essence, I will never see these people again. So it kind of like, it whipped me back into shape a bit, and I thought that this might be one of those types of videos which makes sense to talk on based on how recent an experience this was. So, first off, the human desire to be acknowledged is a fundamental psychological need deeply rooted in our social nature and evolutionary history. I'm reading this off Google, by the way. It's an intrinsic motivation to feel seen, valued, and recognized for one's contributions in existence. The desire manifests in various ways, from seeking praise and appreciation for striving for achievements that garner attention and respect. It's a powerful driver for behavior, influencing our actions and interactions in both personal and professional settings. Basically, it's talking about how acknowledgement stems all the way back from the older days up until now. There's always going to be a need for acknowledgement. Just as much as you need to acknowledge things in your own life, sometimes you need to be acknowledged, whether it's by a peer, someone you look up to, in the workplace, or even if it's just acknowledgement by whatever means, right? This is why acknowledgement is such a prominent thing in our lives. You know, if you want to, for example, get that job at work, most of the time you have to work hard to show that you're acknowledged. Or, if you want that girl to notice you, they'll say, do something different to be worthy of being acknowledged, whatever. However, if we look at a deep-seated need for acknowledgement, this is what the notes and stuff say. Social connection. Humans are social creatures, and feeling acknowledged fulfills our needs of belonging and connection. This is true. If you feel isolated, you feel like, you're that corner guy at the party, or you're that person who never speaks to many people because maybe you have whatever, right? It's very easy to feel like you're lacking human connection because you're not actually connecting with people. And your sense and longing for acknowledgement and, to be seen becomes way more apparent. And I feel like that's the most surface level way people will describe why you want to be acknowledged or accepted by someone. But I feel like that's more of a kind of like validation thing. I feel like it's a bit of a thin line. I feel like half of it's validation, but half of it is just wanting to be seen. But look, the lower we go, it's self-esteem. And I actually want to add on to this. I think it's self-esteem, pride, and ego. Recognition reinforces our sense of self-worth and helps us feel competent and capable. Now, before I go further down into the acknowledgement rabbit hole of the notes, let me give you a little bit of context. There was an event I went to a while ago. I only knew one person. And obviously I went with some friends too, but we didn't know anybody there. Even if you're the most talkative person in the entire place, sometimes the other party just doesn't want to reciprocate. I called it an event because it wasn't really a party, it was more of a gathering, just with a large amount of people. But it was a very they don't want to interact with us, even if we try and interact with them. Except for the select few, but, it's kind of just because everybody's either wasted or, just doesn't care enough and says hello. But you end up in those situations kind of just doing your own thing in the back, looking like these random ass people that pulled up out of nowhere because, you're not interacting with anyone, or people aren't willing to interact. And I just felt like I wanted to be acknowledged. I wanted to be not even accepted, but I just, I didn't want to be that corner guy. So even though I didn't make as much of an effort as I should have, I still found myself, feeling that intense longing for just interacting with people. And I felt like, maybe if I tried a little harder, or maybe if I looked a little bit more like this, or maybe if I acted a little bit more that way, then, it would have went different. And that's a separate topic, but I feel like that was my most recent acknowledgement of wanting to be acknowledged, it made me think damn, why do I care if these people acknowledge me or not? And I only thought about this after. I didn't think about this in the moment, because in the moment I wasn't thinking about that. I was trying to tell myself that, it doesn't really matter, just have fun. But it was hard to when the entire demographic was just looking at us three like we were some like alien people who just came in and just started fucking around. But I mean, look, acknowledgement in the sense of trying to be acknowledged by a higher up, I guess in a more negative way, feeling like you need the praise and appreciation from other people, which is actually a manifestation of desire. In the workplace, it's very easy to get frustrated with things, being like, oh, I'm sick of the boss, I'm sick of this work, I'm sick of that. And then, you have one good day where the boss comes in and showers, a little bit of praise onto you, or something that he doesn't normally do. And then it kind of snaps you back into your old mindset of, oh, maybe this isn't so bad. And it's kind of conflicting because, you wanted all this acknowledgement and then you got it, but, your quality of job still hasn't improved. Yet that acknowledgement can sometimes be a little bit of a charade where people decide to do a little bit above and beyond when they know you're at your kind of wit's end. So it's important to realize that you can actually be manipulated by your own seek of praise and acknowledgement and appreciation. People will make you go the above and beyond to get stuff done for them, just for a pat on the back, or maybe an additional amount of a compliment. You're not getting raises, you're not getting promotions, you're not getting a better work situation. I mean, sometimes you will, but most of the time people will just use and abuse you. And it's just a reality of a lot of different jobs and situations. But to maybe bring it back a notch, bring it a little bit more towards that kind of realistic form of social appreciation and acknowledgement, it is very easy to be somebody who's in a large group of people and wanting everybody in the group, to acknowledge you. Whether that's because you're maybe not much of a talkative person and you want to have more friends. Maybe it's because you want more of a social connection. Maybe you want an ego boost. Maybe you can't accept the reality that some people just aren't worth talking to or saving. Or maybe it's because you feel that you're the odd one out. You'll feel like that you're kind of the black sheep of the group, the ugly duckling. You'll feel like people will do things without you and you're not sure why, and you sometimes think, do I deserve to be in this group? And that's kind of where the insecurity part comes in, and you start to doubt yourself, and you start to think, oh, maybe I'm not worthy of this or that, or maybe they don't like me that much, and you kind of you start spiraling a bit. And this all kind of stems from this desire to be acknowledged. And I mean, look, it dates back to our evolutionary roots. Our ancestors depended on group acceptance to survive. When they were chilling in them campsites that they were making, I don't even know if they were making fire. They're chilling around the makeshift fire, all huddled up. And if you were weak, you got kicked out. If you weren't reproducing or you weren't strong, you were getting abandoned. So it's almost like the same thing, except it's a completely different reality and version of it. But kind of, in essence, the same primordial concept, right? And if we were going to go a little bit further down, we strive for accomplishments. It provides a sense of pride and reinforces our self-image. So, for example, if you're an attractive guy or girl and you go somewhere and a bunch of people hit on you, it's very easy to let that go to your head and let that go to your pride and ego. Now, imagine you're the same level of attractiveness you were. You just came out of an event where 20 people hit on you. The next day, you go out. Not a single person acknowledges you. People even call you ugly and put you down. Imagine your reaction to that. Your reaction would likely be probably a bit of shock, to be honest, but you'd feel like very isolated. You'd want to be acknowledged. You'd be doing things that you normally wouldn't do just to get that same level of recognition and acknowledgement. That's why whenever they do those movies and shows where they show people like the prom queen or the cheerleader girl or the fuckboy guy or whatever, like, gets all this attention, but then like when they don't get the attention, they like do the most cringe crash out I've ever seen in my life. It's the same concept. And as much as that is exaggerated and done for film, people really do react like that if they get that type of attention. Some people are humble about it, some people don't care. But genuinely, a lot of people are surprised if they go from one thing to getting nothing at all. And I think it's important to be humble and realizing that, no one owes you any compliment, no one owes you no one owes you this or that, and you should not care whether or not you're a guy or girl who gets zero attention or all the attention. Just stay humble about it, your time will come. Anyway, with that note, Sometimes as well, people are wanting to feel understood. You know, acknowledgement can also sim that feeling others' understanding and thoughts are a powerful form of social connection. So it's essentially just social connection again, but you want to be understood. You know, you desire acknowledgement to feel like people understand what you're doing. You know, you desire them acknowledging how you go about your life. Another thing as well is there's a big importance in balance. So acknowledgement from peers and people is important, but if you're in the spiral where you require acknowledgement just to be happy or to do this or that, it's not good. You know, you need a balance. You need a healthy and unhealthy amount of desire. You know, sometimes you need to want it so bad that it's borderline scary. But sometimes you got to realize that not everyone's going to acknowledge you, and not everybody's opinion is worth being acknowledged. And I know we've said acknowledged like a million times already in this video, but really think about it. Sometimes it's not worth this one person's acknowledgement. And it's situation to situation. I guess I'll ask you, what is one person's acknowledgement going to do in your world? Like, I like to think of this in a music critic sense, right? Like, sometimes I'll get like needle drop videos, and I'll see all these people crashing out over Fantano's reactions. But I just sit there, I'm like, it's just one person's opinion. This doesn't take away from the millions and millions of people supporting it. You know, like somebody could hate something, but everyone else in the world can love it. You know, there's somebody out there that hates Queen, that hates Bohemian Rhapsody, you know, and that's okay, because not everybody has to like one thing. And I feel like part of the negative things of acknowledgement and our desire to be acknowledged is the fact that we feel bad about ourselves if one person doesn't acknowledge us. You know, we start asking, why does this person not want to acknowledge me or give me time of day? And you start to long for that person's validation. That's when I feel like it dips more into the validation side of it. I'm trying to stay clear from that. But at the same time, you know, they're intertwined. They're both linked, and it is the same thing. But I mean, I don't know. It's all kind of a gray area when it comes to that stuff. And, you know, it can have an impact on your behavior. And there is also some psychological negatives and benefits of it. You know, being acknowledged all the time can make you a little bit, you know, less lonely, less anxious. It makes you more confident and capable with your abilities. But at the same time, if you're not acknowledged, it can make you doubt yourself just as much. You know, you can put yourself further down the hole than you were before. So it's important to kind of remind yourself, all right, well, this has happened, but this has happened too. But anyway, that's it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. Sorry, we went on a little bit of a tangent after that event. But I mean, look, the moral of the story is that sometimes you just got to read the room and evaluate. You know, sometimes in the moment, you might not be able to evaluate, but looking at it as a whole, once it's done, is important. And, you know, it's helpful to self-reflect sometimes. But anyway, that's it for today's video. If you have anything you'd like me to speak about, please comment it down below and I'll get to it at some point. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.